I still look around and I think the people I've gotten to talk to and I've gotten to meet and I've gotten to have conversations with and the places I've been, the locker rooms I've been in, uh, I got to be on a WWE documentary, like that's crazy to me.
Mhm.
Like that's something that if I, talk about telling young Jack anything, I mean, young Jack would never believe this stuff. And so I'm absolutely, if I left today, I'd feel like this was a pretty cool story I get to tell. But of course, I always want more.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Flourish, and stand back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by a fan favorite on the show. I'm joined by the one and only Jack Farmer, wrestling commentary extraordinaire, and from Wrestling Inc. So, welcome to the show.
Always good to be here, Tom. There's nothing I love more than talking rubbish with you.
I'm really excited to have you back on, my friend. So, for the good people that may not know, because my audience has grown a lot since I had you on, and for people that are coming over from your side, where do you
Mhm.
first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Well, the first time I discovered it was my cousin Matt Farmer. He used to babysit me as a kid, actually, and the way he would do that is he'd bring over wrestling tapes and he'd put them on, and I'd watch them. And so, a lot of my early days of being a fan wasn't watching week to week so much as it was just
Mm.
getting tapes and seeing these different wrestlers. And I always said my first memory of like actually sitting down and watching it is the '93 Royal Rumble. And the end of it always stuck with me, being very confused. For those who don't remember, it was Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Sid Vicious in the ring. Hulk Hogan, the good guy, gets dumped to the outside by Sid Vicious, but then Hulk Hogan has he's kind of a poor sport about it at the end. I
Mm.
remember just as a child being, why is he being such a poor sport? That's not what he's supposed to do. That's weird, and that always stuck with me. That's my first like in the moment memory of watching wrestling.
He helps Sid win, doesn't he? He helps
Or no,
Flair win. He helps
yeah, he
Flair
helps.
win, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gets back in and kind of pulls on Sid Vicious's hand. I was like, that's not. What's Hulk doing? It confused me very much as a kid, especially because I really like Sid Vicious. That would really so it really bothered me. But that's how wrestling goes.
You brought up Sid Vicious there. Obviously, as we record this, he's recently passed away.
Hmm.
And what was some of the things that attracted always sounds like the wrong word, but as a character
Yeah.
and a wrestler, what were some of the things that attracted you to him as a fan?
Well, in his like the early days of being a fan of his, I couldn't really put it into words. It was just he was big. He had a charisma. He had an aura about him. Is things I would say today, but as a kid, I was just like, I like this guy. He's big. He's scary. I like that he's psycho. This is great. But where I really got behind him actually was in ECW, and I loved his time there. How this the visual of him walking out in ECW and they had the broken brick entryway and it looked like he was so big it looked like he was the one that broke the bricks that they
Mm.
walked through, and him with Judge Jeff Jones. I remember Judge Jeff Jones would just come out at times and be like, he'd talk about something and say, "You're guilty as charged," or whatever. And then Sid Vicious would come out and wreck people. I just dug it. I loved it. And then, of course, later in WCW, I'm famously a late period WCW fan. And his rivalry with Goldberg and how funny it is in those moments where he like stands on the crushed car and is like, Goldberg. It was just so over the top. I loved it. I was like, this guy is nuts. I just enjoyed everything about him. Plus, he did a
You,
choke slam and a power bomb. How do you beat a guy who does a choke slam and a power bomb? You can't. You can't, Tom.
I fully agree. Do you think it will be the defining promotion of Sid's career?
I think it's gonna end up being WWE. WWE is just too big. It's such an empire that I think if you've been in WWE for the most part, people are gonna say that's your defining place. That's the defining place you were at. Though I always fondly, probably most remember him from WCW because again, I was a late period WCW fan.
You talk about being a late period WCW fan and fondly remembering him there. What was your thoughts on his leg injury in 2000, I
Oh,
believe.
oh, I mean, I think like the rest of us, I just cringed. It was disgusting. And it was one of those things where you had to rewind it and watch it again. You're like, did it really? Oh, did it really? Ah, and then you say, hey, buddy, come here. Look at this. Ah, and you say, so, it was so gross. And I mean, I was younger at the time. So I was just more like, oh, that's gross. That's gross. Where now I look back like, oh, I feel terrible for the guy that happened to him when he was at kind of a high point in his career. I guess as high as you can be in late period WCW. But and I knew he was older, so it was one of those. I don't know how many times we're gonna get to see you wrestle again after something like this. So it was tragic, but at the time, in that moment, I was just more disgusted. Like, ugh, look at that. The foot's hanging.
Mm. I understand what you're saying completely there. You also talked about being a late WCW fan. Does that
Hmm.
mean you started watching WCW late, or what does that exactly
I mean, a lot of people, the end days of WCW gets a lot of probably deserved criticism online, and it gets compared in unfavorable ways. But I enjoyed WCW till the very end for all of its faults, for all of the treasures that were there. I loved it. I loved that it was chaos. I loved that it was a mess. I loved the wrestlers who were a part of it. And so I was one of the people who watched until the day it ended. And I was devastated when it ended. I was super bummed out. I was one of the few people probably that was so bummed out when I saw Vince McMahon pop up on my screen on that day. I really got into WCW though, probably when a lot of people got in, just before Scott Hall made his debut. And so I think it was like I was started tuning into this WCW thing. What is it? Scott Hall comes down. I'm like, oh, what is this all about? And then the NWO hooked me, and I stayed till the bitter end. But yeah, I loved 2000, the year 2000 WCW. The little bit of 2001 we got. I love 99 WCW. It was, like I said, chaos. It was a mess, but it was just a fun show to watch.
What was your thoughts on Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo coming out and being like, nope, these belts don't matter. You're all stripped. We're going to reset.
I would hate it today. I would hate it today. But as a kid, again, as a younger person in that moment, I thought this is awesome. The whole world has changed. This is a different company we're getting to watch now. And so I was really into it. Especially because I loved a lot of the younger wrestlers, and I was just someone who very much was along the lines of, man, if some of these younger guys get a chance, they're going to be huge stars. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the moment. They're all going to get their chance. They're going to all be stars. And so I really loved it at the time. Today, I'd probably be like, you can't just start over. But in the moment, I was really into it. I was really excited about the new blood.
We'll go off WCW in a second, but I have one final question. What was your
Yeah.
thoughts when, obviously, because you were a WWE fan, as you said,
Hmm.
were you a fan during the Attitude Era and Vince Russo when Vince Russo was doing this thing?
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I mean, I didn't really know all the ins. I actually didn't really get into like the internet side of it and like looking at results and spoilers and things like that till much later. So,
Mm,
truth be told, I didn't really know a whole lot of what Vince Russo was doing versus what anyone else was doing. When Vince Russo came to WCW, I just knew he was quote unquote the guy that made Stone Cold and The Rock, and so I was like, oh, that sounds cool. How accurate that statement is, I don't know, but this was back in the day. So, like I said, I didn't have a lot of access to that kind of stuff. So I was pretty excited about him coming over. But I love the Attitude Era. The Attitude Era was, I'm one of those guys, old guys now, that's like, it was the best. It was awesome. I loved
mm.
it. I loved the Monday Night Wars. I loved at the time going to school and arguing with my friends over which side was better, which wrestler was better, who would win in a match, Goldberg or Stone Cold. It was a great time to be a wrestling fan.
Well, you talk about being a great time to be a wrestling fan back then. It's a pretty
Mhm.
good time to be a wrestling fan now, Jack. So, where is your
Absolutely.
current fandom as we record this in September of 2024?
I love wrestling across the board. I think it's all knocking it out of the park. And I know that sounds like a safe answer, and but it really is. I think that WWE has really started putting on some incredible stories, some incredible shows. And I think whether you're a fan on Monday, Tuesday, or Friday, or all three of them, you're getting something different. You're getting something fun. And the biggest thing about WWE right now is I always say they don't waste your time. There was a time, let's talk about like 2019, where you may see something that gets built up for 6 months and then it's gone and they never talk about it again. Or I always use Eric Rowan's mechanical spider moment
Oh
as the,
yeah.
or what's in this crate? What's in this box? What is it? What is it? I don't know for like months. And then it's like, oh, it's a toy. And then it gets smashed and we move on. And I'm like, what? What? You can't do that. And that's gone. Now, if they do something, it's going to pay off. And I love it. AEW, I love that too. Again, it's very chaotic in a lot of ways. And that I enjoy. There's a lot of characters over there that I think stand out and are different that I'm really enjoying. As of recording this, of course, Swerve and Adam Page are feeling like we're getting to the climax of this rivalry that I
I
think
think
is
this
really
is
one of
just
the
act
best
two.
ones.
I think we'll get a third act, but that's my opinion.
It is. I think that this is what they're doing is great. And those characters are so cool and they're so different. And you don't see a lot of that in pro wrestling. And I think that goes down the board with AEW, the kind of characters they have that stand out and that are awesome. And the athleticism and I mean, Will Ospreay and now Ricochet over there. AEW is an exciting place to be watching wrestling as well.
So I think the takeaway from what you've just said there, Jack, is wrestling is good. Don't tear down one show because you like the other.
Oh, absolutely. And if someone says, my flavor of wrestling is NXT, so that's all I watch. Great. That's awesome. I totally get it. NXT is awesome as well. But yeah, because as a fan too, who's gone through this boom of the Attitude Era, and then now this boom of whatever we're calling this era, I also know what the dip in between feels like. I know what the slow periods are like. So enjoy what we have because it's cyclical. It'll lose some of its steam at some point. That's just the way all media is. Marvel was big for a while and eventually it
Yeah,
dipped for a bit too. It'll dip eventually. So instead of finding reasons to hate what's great, love all this awesome stuff. And that's not even talking about like TNA, the indies, and all the other stuff that's going on in wrestling. Whatever you like as far as entertainment goes, pro wrestling is offering it right now. And that's just an awesome place to be in.
I really agree. So how, as a podcaster, how do you maintain your fandom though and go, okay, I'm not going to cover this for Wrestling Inc. just so I have a show to watch and stuff like that? What is the show you watch as a fan and things like that?
I pop into just about everything as a fan. Again, I'm a wrestling nerd. That's why I do this. That's why I talk about it all the time. If I have a friend who's into wrestling, I end up texting them all day about certain stuff that's wrestling based. But I think as a podcaster, for me, what has helped a lot and what I try to do is I try to remain a fan. I think sometimes podcasters, they try to shed their fandom and they get too worried about what numbers are, what ratings are, what merch sales are, or they're too busy trying to find a hole in the booking or better booking and they lose what makes wrestling magic. And that sometimes it's just weird and chaotic and fun. And instead of so like you'll never see me unless I'm asked to for a show talking about ratings. I don't care about ratings. I don't care about ticket sales. Don't care
Mm.
about merch sales. And sometimes people talk about like I'm a big Kyle Fletcher guy. I think Kyle Fletcher is going to be a massive star someday.
So
And some people,
underrated, personally.
oh yeah, I think he's fantastic, and he's 25 years old. Like so, a lot of people will get like, well, he's lost this match, blah blah blah. I'm like just enjoy it, man. Just enjoy. Like, do you enjoy it when he's on? Great. Like, be into it. And it's okay to not be able to quantify it sometimes. Sometimes just like I really like this wrestler. Something about him makes me happy to see him. So that's what I try my best to focus on is to remember just that when this wrestler comes out or when this happens, how do I feel about it? Not what is the crowd doing? Not are we seeing T-shirts or things, but just what's the feeling I get from this person? Is it positive or negative? And that's where I try to focus.
We talked about this last time a little bit, and you said that's what made you and Raj Giri such a good team when you was
Yeah.
podcasting for Wrestling Inc. because he would say, but this from the business perspective, I believe the comparison you used was, but I love to Akira Tozawa, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah, yeah.
And it was like,
Still crazy for Akira too.
and I believe the comparison was like, but he makes me laugh. He's fun. And but
Yeah,
Raj was like, but he doesn't shift much. And you were like, I don't care. I'm a fan.
right. Yeah, because he makes me laugh. He comes out, he'll do a dance or he'll do whatever he's doing, and I have a good time. This guy's great. So I don't care if he's selling a bunch of merch or getting people to change the channel. Other people changing the channel doesn't change what I'm watching, you know? And so, yeah, Raj Giri is great, though. We are very different in how we approach our fandom of pro wrestling. I appreciate what Raj brings to the table, but I'm very much just, yeah, enjoy this stuff. And also, it's fun. And I may have said this last time, I apologize, but what's fun about having being a fan of certain people like an Akira Tozawa is I would say if you're a fan of Roman Reigns, and we all are, if he's not winning the championship, kind of feels like a letdown. But Akira Tozawa, if he has a match that goes 5 minutes, I'm like, there's my guy, Akira
I
Tozawa,
love
knocked
that.
it out of the park. You have fun with all these little wins. And one of my favorite stories to watch in pro wrestling was Booker T. And as a WCW fan, watching him go from being a tag team guy to being struggling to win the TV championship and then crawling his way up to the US championship and then fighting his way up to become the world champion and being a part of this story. Did he sell tickets? I don't know, but that was just when he won the world championship for the first time at Bash the Beach. I remember just being like, you did it, dude. That's awesome. I was a part of that journey, and it's so fun to be a part of these journeys for people.
King Booker. Actually, I said that the wrong way around. Booker T or King Booker?
I love King Booker, but I am a Booker T guy. Again, WCW background. I love the Harlem Heat. I loved his old yes, yes, yes. No, no, no. The entrance music. I love Booker T. But really, like I said, my favorite part of his career was that rise in WCW. Great run in WWE though.
Booker T on commentary in TNA, no, NXT. What's your thoughts?
It's weird. I think if you were to draw up the like the textbook way you're supposed to be a commentator, he probably wouldn't fare too well in that regard. But at the same time, Booker T NXT, if you took Booker T off of NXT, that sounds like a completely different show. Wade Barrett's one of my absolute favorite color commentary guys right now. If you put Wade Barrett on NXT instead of Booker T, that's a different show. The whole thing changes without Booker T on there. And so I have to give him a great score. I have to say he's awesome because he's kind of the heart and soul of the audio of NXT. And that's what you're always going for.
It's really, really cool. We brought up commentary there. This was a segue that I didn't mean to do, my friend. How do
Oh,
you start in the ring announcing and commentary world your good self?
so I actually went to a wrestling school to get into the commentary side and the ring announcing side. Um, And there, we learned about all the basic stuff, setting up rings, I had done a few bumps and things like that. And you help out where you can. But of course, I always made it clear I want to do commentary, I want to do ring announcing. And I learned there. They had classes there, Santino Brothers. Anyone can check them out at santinobros.net in Southern California. We also have shows we do through Santino Bros. But you learn there. And then you get some advice there. You actually do it. That's always the best way to learn.
Mm.
But also now when I listen to commentary, when I listen to shows, I try to look at how shows are put together and how commentary is doing things. So I try to make sure that like Michael Cole, I think is fantastic. And I think he's obviously become the voice of a generation. I I look at how he does it and what he does do and what he doesn't do. So, for instance, for me personally, something I learned from Michael Cole is if two guys are cutting a promo in the ring, I shut up because Michael Cole doesn't talk when two people are cutting promos in the ring. I know some people they'll chime in and they'll do the oh or like, well, that was some tough words, and they'll try to chime in between these promos.
Mm.
Michael Cole doesn't talk, so I don't talk, and so I think making sure you're always learning and listening and finding these things as well.
How did you get paired up with the great man that is Jordan Castle in some of your uh, commentary duties?
Jordan Castle's fantastic. I love getting to work with him. Very fortunate, actually. Prestige Wrestling is where we get to work together
Mm.
whenever they come to Los Angeles. And uh, I reached out to Prestige, asking them if they needed help. I try to reach out to places regularly just to see. With commentary, the tricky thing is most places have a team already, and so they don't need another person. So you got to keep reaching out, hoping that an opportunity presents itself. Fortunately, they trusted me to come on with
Mm.
Jordan Castle and do commentary, and Jordan Castle is really one of the funnest people to work with on commentary because that guy loves pro wrestling. He loves what he's doing. And I always say one of my favorite parts about working those shows is before we go on the air, Jordan Castle and I just geek out about who we get to do commentary for and our favorite wrestling moments. And I think we're kind of kindred spirits in that I look at
Oh yeah,
how I loved late period WCW. He was a huge TNA fan. I think that there's a similarity there and sometimes the way those companies have been perceived historically. So we just love the stuff we get to do, and he's very knowledgeable. He knows his stuff, and he's just a treat to work for. He makes it very easy to do commentary alongside.
cheap plug. Check out my latest interview of after this one goes live, before this one went live, with the great man that is Jordan Castle. We had a full hour conversation, and he spoke very highly of you, good sir.
Oh, it's very nice of him. It'd be very depressing if I tuned in to listen to him and he just buried me. But it'd make our next time working together very uncomfortable. But he is, yeah, like I said, he's great. And usually what I do is a little more on the color commentary side when I work with him. He's the play-by-play for Prestige, and he just makes the job easy. He does all the heavy lifting, and I just chime in whenever, whenever I have something fun to say. Color's fun.
You talked about color being fun there. Do you think we'll ever see? I know you're based in Los Angeles. He's based in, I can't remember where Brian Zane's based, but some California, I believe. I can't remember. That's
Yeah, I don't
really
know where
bad.
Brian's saying. No, I don't remember offhand. I feel like he's more
Nevada?
east. I don't. I know him, but I always see him working. I don't actually know where he's located specifically. You got to get him on the show.
He's just been on the show actually. A cheap plug
Oh,
about 2 months ago, as this one goes live, he would have been on the show. Which leads me
oh,
to my next question: What what do you think we'll ever see a three-man booth of you, Brian Saint, and Jordan Castle for Prestige Wrestling?
I would love to see a three-man booth with me, Brian Zane, and Jordan Castle. That'd be a great time. I am a big fan of Brian Zane as well. Never had the chance to work with him, but he does great work. The problem with three-man booths in indie wrestling is it's overhead, and you're trying to save money, so you
No,
don't
I
usually don't want that
understand.
many people. But I would love to be on a three-man booth with those guys. Three-man booths are tricky for the main play-by-play guy because you're doing a lot of traffic and you're directing a lot of uh, conversation. But when you're one of the other guys, it's easy. You just wait for your turn and then you get to hit a home run. You know, it's like they have to do all the hard stuff, but then I can just be quiet till I know I have a gem. When you're play-by-play, you've got to keep talking. You got to keep
Mm.
it going. But when on a three-man booth, then I can just wait for that moment unless I know I have like a banger comment and then say it. And I was like, hey, everything Jack says is great. He's amazing.
I like that. It's a bit like in AEW. I believe Tony Schiavone said this on his podcast. He's like, I love the three-man booth because I don't have to do all the commentary. I leave that to Excalibur, and I'll just come up with a gem, and they'll all bust a gut. That's
Yeah,
really
exactly.
funny.
Exactly. So, and Jordan is so good at the play-by-play. I love doing play-by-play myself. Typically, I'm a play-by-play guy, but Jordan Castle is the voice of Prestige. So, in that case, whenever I always try to be respectful of people's territory, as I like to say, that's
Yeah.
his territory. He's the play-by-play guy. So when we work together, I try to do color a little bit, and fill that role. But yeah, he's great at it. He makes it very easy.
You talked about earlier taking some bumps at Santino Brothers.
Hmm.
If you wanted to be involved in commentary, what was the thinking behind I'm going to take some bumps?
Well, I want to know what it's like in the ring. Now, I'm never going to be a pro wrestler. I don't have that dream in me. Maybe one day I'll do a match. I don't know. I wouldn't hold my breath for it though. But I want to know what it's like. I want to know when they're hitting the ropes, what that feels like. Why does it? Why do we say that it hurts more to land on the apron than it does in the middle of the ring? I want to know that difference. And I want to know it helps you understand what people are thinking, what people are going through. Again, I haven't had a match. I'm not gonna say like I know exactly how it feels to be Will Ospreay at the end of a 60-minute Iron Man match, but
Yeah,
I do understand that when you're running ropes and you're turning and going different directions, I understand the way that hits the cardio a little different. I understand how that can be dizzying. I understand that when someone does get slammed on the mat, I know like, yeah, that rattles you. Your head can whip. Yeah, I know how that feels. And so I can understand a little bit more. And I wanted that understanding when I did commentary instead of just trying to guess or assume.
that's really, really cool. We've gone around our houses, Jack, but that's just how my conversations go. I do
Yeah.
apologize. But
No, no problem.
how did you join Wrestling Inc. and start in the podcasting? What came first,
Yeah.
commentary and ring announcing or podcasting?
Podcasting originally. So I've been a host. That's kind of my main job is I'm a host. I DJ. I host corporate and live events. And I was actually, funny enough, trying to figure out if I could do something like podcasting so I didn't have to be live and in person for multiple things. And my good friend Flobo Boyce, who's now on Wrestling Inc. as well, you should have Flobo on your show sometime. He's a great dude.
Would love it
He
if
was
you could put me in touch once we get off this.
I absolutely will. And you have it on air now for me saying that. So I'm held to it.
Sorry.
But no, he's great. You'll love him. So I asked him about, he was working with a company called AfterBuzz TV. And AfterBuzz TV was founded by Maria Menounos, who was a ambassador to WWE. Kevin Undergaro was there, who now I believe is a manager for Mercedes Moné. I may have that wrong, but
I believe you're
I think
correct.
there's a connection there. But in any case, he that was the studio, and so he helped me get in with AfterBuzz TV, and I worked there for about a year. The pandemic closed everything down, and so that went out a bit. I think they're still in business, but they stopped doing the podcast like they were.
I believe when I
Uh,
had George, as I can never pronounce his last name, but George
Hermosa,
Hermosa on, he said they're still doing things, but it's like they won't bring any new people in. It's like their bubble now, and it's all done
yeah,
from like how we're doing things like this.
right, exactly. And so after that closed, there's the pandemic. I was just looking for stuff, and I just reached out to people, and I reached out to Raj Giri about Wrestling Inc. And we had a chat on the phone. And then I think we had a chat or two on the phone. And then he had me come in as a special guest. I did a couple guests spots, and then eventually he had me host one. And now I'm lucky to say that I feel like I'm one of the main voices of Wrestling Inc. And I host the Monday show every Monday for Raw. I host the Wednesday show every Wednesday for AEW, and then I come on other episodes as well, like a lot of the PLEs, the pay-per-views, and things like that. And it really, what I would say with all this, and when it comes to commentary, when it comes to anything, is just try to move in a direction and try to get as much experience as you can. Because I got a
Mm.
lot of help, like I said, hosting events. DJing weddings, for instance, you have to MC a lot of that. That doesn't seem anything related to pro wrestling, but I borrow a lot of what I learned from that when it is time for ring announcing, when it is time for hosting shows like this. And so whatever you're doing, try to just push beyond what you're doing, try to learn more, and you never know where you're going to end up. I started as a wedding DJ, got into pro wrestling, podcasting, pro wrestling stuff. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll be a voice actor. Who knows? But it's because I'm just always trying to push beyond where I'm at and see what else is out there and see what other breadcrumbs lead me.
I was about to ask you your advice for podcasters, but that seems like a great piece of advice there to always sort of push forward and sort of broaden your horizons, for lack of a better word. Is that the right phrase?
Yeah, I think I would say that. And like what you're doing now as well. I mean, there was a time when you didn't have a show and you wanted to start a show. I don't know You got to do an interview with yourself one of these days, by the way. I don't know how
I've
you'll do that,
partially
but
done one, but I do.
yeah,
I want to reach out to someone to get
yeah,
them to interview
yeah.
me as an episode. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
You well, you should. And because there was a time when you had nothing, but you started doing stuff. Now I know you've had guys like CVV on the
Oh
probably
no, he's
biggest
been paying attention.
the biggest interviewer in pro wrestling today, I think by a mile. I think we can agree, especially
Oh god, yeah.
nowadays. He's not even close. I mean, you've had a lot of people on here that probably a few years ago, you say, there's no way why would that person
Oh
talk to
god,
me?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, and I'm sure if you went back to your first episode, like if you couldn't pay me to
I
watch my first
cringe.
episode of something.
So my
Uh,
first episode was with Adam Pacitti of Cultaholic,
yeah,
and I watched that one back, and I go, "Shut up, let him talk, get a format." Do you know what I mean? It's like, and
yeah,
I call that one, Jack, Fanboy Central, if you know what I mean.
yes, yes, yeah. I look at some of my old interviews. I look at some of the old shows I've hosted, and at the time I was like, man, I knocked this out of the park. I'm really good. And then now I look back, I'm like, what was I thinking? That was terrible. But that's part of the process, and something I talk about with Flobo, who I mentioned earlier, Flobo Boys, who you can check on Draped in Gold and Wrestling Inc., is I hate the word lucky. I hate when people say you're lucky because luck, like people may say, Tom, you're so lucky you got to chat with CVV, but you weren't lucky. You went out here, you pushed, you did stuff, you failed, you got better, you stopped failing, and you grew. But just keep doing that stuff. And same thing with you. I mean, maybe you'll interview more and more people. Maybe you'll become the next CVV, or maybe the bump comes back and says, hey, we're bringing back the bump. We need a new host, Tom. We'd love to have you on it. Maybe they say,
You think
NXT,
way highly of me than I
you
do.
know, well, that's how it works, though. You never know. I mean, everyone has to fake it the first time, Tom.
Oh yeah.
First time I did ring announcing, I had no idea what I was doing. One of my favorite stories it's somewhere out there. It was on Primetime Live with United Wrestling Network. The first wrestling show I ever worked. It was also during the lockdown. I went in there and I was asked to do interviews, and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I knew how to do it. And so I remember, though, one of the interviews, I would ask the question. It was Bad Dude Tito, who is a phenomenal wrestler for people who don't know who he is. He's really starting to blow up internationally now, though. And I remember I'd ask him a question like, I'd say, so how do you feel about this matchup? And I'd hold the microphone over to him, and then I would look at the camera because I thought, yeah, why wouldn't I look at the camera? The camera's there. And so it's both of us looking at the camera, looking like we're a tag team or something. And then I didn't realize later, oh, yeah, Mean Gene isn't looking at the camera when he's interviewing. He's looking at the person he's interviewing. You know what I mean? It was just like a weird visual thing. And now I laugh at it and I cringe at it. What was I doing?
Oh
But
yeah.
that's one of those things you learn along the way and you get better. And so if you don't think you're ready for the return of the bump, I don't know if the bump's ever coming back, but
I know what you
I,
mean.
I'm booking you, Tom. You're gonna be on the return of the bump. That's what you're gonna be doing someday.
I hope so. And I always enjoy chatting with you, man, because you stroke my ego. I'm not gonna lie. How
One of
did
these
it
days.
how did it feel for Wrestling Inc., do you think? And how did it better Wrestling Inc. to bring someone in that worked for WWE like Jimmy Corderas?
Oh, Jimmy Corderas is a huge get for Wrestling Inc. It's credibility. It's, I always say I can have my own opinions as a fan, as I've said before, as a fan, and we can have Raj Giri. He's no longer with Wrestling Inc., but we've talked about him before, so I'll put him over again. Gigantic Pop is his show. I like putting people over,
Mm.
and also Practical Money is a great investment newsletter he does. But he can give his ideas on the financial side. I can give my thoughts on the fan side. But Jimmy's been there, so he knows what happens. And we can say like, why did the ref do this? And he can say, well, I can tell you why. Or he can say, why? We'll be like, well, this seems weird. Like, well, this is what happened. This is what they're saying in the back. This is how things actually work and why they're doing it. And it just adds so much credibility. Jimmy Corderas, by the way, fantastic guy. One of my favorite. favorite things is getting to we were in both in Philadelphia for WrestleMania this year, and we actually got to hang out, and we went to the Rocky Steps and we ran up the Rocky
Oh
Steps, and
wow.
it was just one of those like weird like fan moments where you're like, if you would have told me back when I was watching wrestling that hey, see that ref on TV? Someday you're gonna run up the Rocky Steps with him. I'd be like, what? What? Why? How would that even happen? But there we were, and him and his wife were fantastic. We got to hang out for a little bit before the show. Jimmy's a great dude, and I think having someone with credibility is always great when you have a show like that, especially with, to be fair, other wrestling podcasts that also have credibility for different reasons. So it's good to have someone who's been there to really talk you through why things happen.
How do you deal with burnout as a podcaster and someone that's a massive wrestling fan, Jack? How do you deal with burnout as you're basically talking about something you love, but then there might be days that you're like, too much wrestling, don't want to do this today.
Yeah. That's the question we all have to ask ourselves, Tom, is how you handle burnout. My thing, when I start to feel burned out, and this is what I say to a lot of wrestling fans, because this is something I don't think a lot of wrestling fans know, but it's okay to miss episodes. It's
Mhm.
okay to miss shows. They'll catch you right back up. And so if you're not feeling like watching a show, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not going to watch SmackDown tonight. It's okay to say, yeah, I don't need to see every episode of Rampage. It's if I think sometimes wrestling fans feel like we get like a badge of honor if we watch every single thing out there and we can
Mhm.
say that we've seen it all and we know everything. But it's just not realistic in this day and age to watch a 3 hour Monday show, a 2 hour Tuesday show, a 2 hour Wednesday show. If you're watching TNA, a 2 hour Thursday show, 3 hours on Friday, 2 hours on Saturday. Plus, I mean, it's a job. And
Yeah.
so to me, if there's a time where I'm feeling burned out, if I'm not covering the show, if I'm just not in the mood to watch it, or if I can't see it for because I got another thing going on, I skip it and I say I'm not going to go back and watch it. I'll get caught up and it'll be fine. And it always is. And I think that you just have to know it's okay to skip shows.
That's very, very cool. You brought up being a wedding DJ earlier as well.
Yeah.
What was the song you played the most, and then what was maybe your cringiest song that the bride and groom maybe asked you to play?
Um, the song that I has been played the most, this is kind of funny. I'm sure I don't know how people feel about it, but September by Earth, Wind and Fire is
Yeah,
a song I
I
play
thought
a
so.
lot. It's kind of a perfect dance floor opener. It's something older guests know and understand. It's dancey enough so younger guests kind of get it. So that's one I play quite a bit. And it's old, but I love it. So I play it a lot. Um, Weddings are weird because you get super different crowds every time. So sometimes, yeah, that song works great. Sometimes, like, well, I'd never play that song for this crowd, you know?
Mm.
Um, and so it's always different. As far as like cringiest goes, I don't really have a lot of cringy ones because it's usually if the rule of thumb with the wedding DJs, if the bride and groom are happy, everybody's happy.
Oh yeah.
So there are certain songs where I'm like, I wouldn't play this song, but okay, this is what you want. And if they like it, then it's cool and it all works out. So there's rarely a song that I'm like, this song. But I would say one of the toughest ones is I did one where the groom wanted tavern music for dinner, like World of Warcraft, Game of Thrones tavern music, which is cool. But then for dinner, but then as soon as dancing started, he wanted like really heavy EDM music. Uh, and so it was a really harsh transition from like flutes and harps to like loud drum and bass, like in
Oh
like a
wow.
really it was very jarring, but that's what they wanted, and everyone was happy and it was great. But I remember like this is going to be a very rough transition to, to do, but it worked out fine. But yeah, that's probably the one I was most worried about because that's a tough it's a
Oh
tough
yeah.
move, Tom, to go from one to the other.
As we look at wrapping this up, because believe it or not, we've been talking almost an hour. and I do want to be respectful of your time, my friend. I have sort of four questions for you. One's a
Let's
bit
do it.
self-indulgent, so I'm going to ask this one first. Have I
Yeah.
improved since you came on last time? What did you enjoy about this conversation and everything in between?
Yeah, I think you've done a lot better job. No offense to the old Tom, but I think it's a lot smoother. I think the questions are great. This feels more like a conversation and less like an interview. This is perfect.
I really appreciate that, my friend. And then I'm curious to know if you could have a conversation with Jack, who first discovered wrestling, what do you think he'd say about where your career is
Um, that's a good question. I think I would just say enjoy the ride because I think my life's pretty good right now, and I would worry anything I say is going to mess it up.
almost like the
So
butterfly effect sort of thing.
right, yeah. So I wouldn't want to say anything. I'd almost rather just be like, you know what, Jack, just enjoy the ride.
That's
Because if
really
I say something, I'm gonna mess it. If I don't want to botch it.
no, I understand what you're saying completely. Then final two questions, Jack, before we do my traditional wrap-up questions. Do
Love
you
it.
view your career as a success? And what would you want your legacy to be if you stepped away from the wrestling industry right now?
I absolutely view it as a success. Obviously, we all want more. My dream is to one day work for one of these major companies and work in pro wrestling full time. And I say all the time, for some reason, I got a weird dream of being on a pre-show to a PLE or a pay-per-view. For some reason, that just seems like it'd be a ball. So I'd be hyping up the
Oh
show,
yeah,
talking about how great the upcoming matches are going to be. That's my thing. I get excited about stuff pretty easy. So I think that would be my absolute dream come true if that were to happen. But as of now, I still look around and I think the people I've gotten to talk to and I've gotten to meet and I've gotten to have conversations with and the places I've been, the locker rooms I've been in, uh, I got to be on a WWE documentary, like that's crazy to me. Like
mhm.
that's something that if talk about telling young Jack anything, I mean, young Jack would never believe this stuff. And so I'm absolutely, if I left today, I'd feel like this was a pretty cool story I get to tell. But of course, I always want more.
What do you think your legacy is, my friend?
Um, if I have a legacy, I'm flattered, to be fair, if there's any legacy. But I like to think that I would hope that my legacy is that I always tried to bring a level of professionalism, a level of positivity, and that I always wanted everything to be fun at the end of the day,
Mhm.
and that I always wanted every show I did to be as best as it could be.
That's a beautiful way to end this. But before we do, Jack, we're going to do the traditional wrap up segment, which is known as people will know if they've seen the videos before, generic wrestling questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know. So I'll ask Jack his favorite overall match, favorite pay per view card, such as Double or Nothing 2019, his favorite wrestler's entrance theme, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions I assume Jack might be asked on social media or in Wrestling Inc. live streams. So now he'll have a place to be like, guys, I have answered this. Please go watch this. So, what's your favorite match
Yes,
of all time?
my favorite match of all time is it goes back and forth between two, but right now I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Goldberg versus Hulk Hogan for the world title
Mm,
in WCW because that was a matchup that my buddy and I, it was July, we were on summer break. We were super pumped about this. We were both huge fans and we made a whole day out of it. Like we went and we got snacks and we played wrestling video games all day and it was just a really fun, cool day. And that match was so exciting. The crowd was electric. It came through the television. And so, just as a wrestling fan, that was probably my favorite wrestling moment.
What is the one that is the runner up?
It's it sounds like I'm a crazy Hulk Hogan fan, but it's Hulk Hogan versus The Rock or Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus The Rock at WrestleMania. And that is because, as I said, I'm a late period WCW fan. And as a WCW fan at the end, WWE kind of rubbed WCW's faces in it not being great and being lame and being bad television. And there was this part of me that when Hollywood Hulk Hogan and The Rock faced each other, it felt like a little bit like late period WCW was showing what it could do. And I remember that opening moment, of course, the stare down. But for me, the part after that, when they lock up and Hogan shoves The Rock down and then he poses like this, that was
Mhm.
one of the biggest pops in my life as a WCW fan. It was like our guy showed their guy what's up for a moment. And internally, that was one of the best moments as a wrestling fan I've ever had.
What about your favorite pay-per-view card of all time?
That one is tough. It might be that first AEW Revolution show that they did. I'm historically bad at remembering years and dates.
2020. Is that the
It might,
one? What's on
yeah,
the card?
that was that where Adam Page and Kenny Omega for the tag team championships
Yep.
and Pac
MJF
versus Orange
Cody,
Cassidy.
Pac versus Orange
Yeah,
Cassidy,
yeah,
Jericho versus Moxley, and people are going to
yeah.
hate me in the comments, but I can't remember the women's match, and that sounds really bad. But do you know
No,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah. It's but that show to me was when I really knew, oh, AEW is gonna be awesome. This is gonna be a great show because I didn't really expect a lot. I didn't really know a lot of what to expect, but I felt like everything on that show was incredible. I didn't know anything about Orange Cassidy at the time. And
Mm.
I remember I was one of those guys that was like, this Orange Cassidy thing ain't gonna work. What is this? And then I saw the match and I just remember being like, this is so cool. I love this guy. And I think it was Jericho Moxley on that one.
Yep.
Uh, I'm a huge Jericho fan, but the way they got me cheering for Moxley throughout that as well made me go, wow, you have turned my fandom. This is an incredible matchup. That tag team match blew me away. I was so into that tag team match. That might be one of my favorite matches of all
The
time, too.
best tag team match ever.
It was so good. Maybe I love that match. I just remember leaving that card going, wow, AEW, this show was it blew me away. I was flabbergasted.
You talk about there being a huge Jericho fan. Just quickly before we finish generic questions,
Yeah.
thoughts on the learning tree?
I like it. I think it's so cheesy and corny and cringy that it works to me. It's
He knows
so
what he's doing.
he absolutely does. And the high guys is starting to get over. I think it's working for me. And I also think it's great for Big Bill and Brian Keith. It's getting them on TV, getting them meaningful time on TV. I think they're better off than they were before it. So I love it. I think it's great in a cringy way. I'll be honest, I started liking it as kind of a almost like
Tongue in cheek.
as a yeah, kind of trolly because everyone hated it. I was like, "Hi guys, I love this show, the Learning Tree." But over time, I always say it's like saying "bro," where like you say it as a joke at first, and then before you know it, you're saying "bro" all the time. So at first it's kind of joking, but now I'm like, no, this is actually it's really fun to like because it's great.
That's really cool. What about, and then continuing with generic questions, what about your favorite wrestler's entrance theme?
Entrance theme is tough because there's so many good ones. I think I go NWO. I was an NWO I my my for a very long time. In fact, I guess I still am because I said I was NWO for life, and I stick to what I say. So probably just that NWO theme for me will always have a special place in my heart.
Just quickly again, and I keep going off on tangents. I do apologize.
Yeah.
We will wrap this up in a minute. But
Yeah.
have you ever been asked to play a wrestling theme as a wedding DJ?
Oh, oh yeah. I did a grand entrance with John Cena's theme, and the bride and groom came out
Which one?
wearing the "My Time Is Now." Time is up, time is now. And they came out wearing uh, world championships, and they had me introduce them as the new tag team champions, world tag team champions. So the inner wrestling nerd of me was like, "But you're wearing the world title, not the tag team titles." But I didn't say anything. But in my mind, I was like, "Those aren't those aren't the tag team titles."
Brilliant. Awesome. And then speaking of tag teams, Jack, who's your favorite tag team?
I always go the Dudley Boys. I think they're the best of all time. They were. I was a fan of them. Another one of those teams. Their journey, ECW, WWE, TNA, was always fun to watch them. And I think that their ability to have great matches, be on the microphone, different styles of matches with everybody, they got to be my favorite tag team.
And then finally, Jack, the biggest generic question, in my opinion. Who's your favorite overall wrestler?
The greatest wrestler of all time, Lance Storm. I have a signed photo from him right back there. Everyone's saying to themselves, Lance Storm, really? Yes, Lance Storm, really? I was a huge Lance Storm fan. I always thought that I grew up a fan of Bret Hart as Bret Hart was kind of winding down. I discovered Lance Storm and I was like, this guy wrestles so well. He's so good in the ring. And then he became my favorite. And every time I'd say it, people would say, really? Lance Storm? And I'd say, yes, Lance Storm. And then I started digging my heels in. And so he really became my favorite. Another good example, though, of a guy great in ECW, went to WCW, was cool to watch him win all those championships and do well there. And so Lance Storm is my number one wrestler. He's my favorite.
That's very, very cool. As we wrap this up, Jack, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question I end this show on is, I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, even just people with social media, we're all sort of going to live forever in a very, very weird way if you think about it. So what is one
Yes.
piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please forget about
Most of it you could probably just throw into the bin. I don't think we need to see most of it. Currently my favorite moment in the pro wrestling world. I don't know if this counts as for the podcasting side, but I got to ring announce for Defy Wrestling the Swerve Strickland Nick Wayne championship match that was their last encounter in Defy Wrestling, and it was a really cool moment for myself, obviously, but it was big for them. It was big for the fans. It was big for the company. It was big for the championship. And so to be a part of something that I think will probably go down in their history books to me
it.
was really something I'm probably most proud of and my favorite moment as far as being in this weird world.
That's really, really cool. As we wrap this up, Jack, obviously, once again, I want to say thank you for a great conversation, but please promote yourself. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Yeah, you can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. You can also check out my website, jackcfarmer.com, where you can see my demo reels for commentary, ring announcing, hosting, DJing, all that good stuff, as well as you can book me while you're there. I got a few pieces of merch you can purchase while you're there as well. Yeah, follow me on social media. Also, you can check me out again on Wrestling Inc. You can check me out on Draped in Gold, which is a show where Flobo and I cover NXT every single Wednesday. But also Santino Brothers. I'm doing commentary, ring announcing for those guys, as well as Prestige at times. PCW Ultra, I'm doing ring announcing for. Defy sometimes here and there. Wherever I can. I want to do as much commentary, ring announcing as possible. So hey, if you're a company, hit me up. But also, again, just always pursuing the dream. I want to be a part of one of these big companies, and I want to be able to do this full time. So hopefully, one of them catch wind of this and they say, Jack, give us a call, or they call me. I don't have their number.
I hope they do. I hope they do, because this man is one of the hardest working people in this space and one of the nicest as well. So if you guys like
Oh, thank
this,
you.
make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Flourish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or Tom Talk Flourish, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.